Trees talk to each other. Now, of course, they lack the mouths to render speech and have nothing in the way of language that a linguist would recognize, but they absolutely communicate. I'm currently reading a book by a German forester named Peter Wohlheben, is my best guess, called The Hidden Life of Trees. He describes how, in one of the opening chapters, how acacia trees on the savannas of Africa tell one another that a hungry giraffe is out on the prowl, about to hit the leaf buffet, so its neighbors can immediately create the compounds that make them taste bad. In the beech and oak forests of his home in the Eifel Mountains, Wohlheben talks about the communication through roots that allow bigger, stronger, and older trees to share nutrients and water with the sick, small, and damaged trees in their community. It turns out the trees work best in forests. It may be easy to assume that a lone tree with no need to share its light, water, or nutrients would be better off than in a crowded group. As it turns out, though, that group, with its social bonds, could better be thought of as a superorganism, where it is truly more than the sum of its parts. Grade school biology taught us about the survival of the fittest. We, as individuals, automatically tend to interpret that survival as the survival of the fittest individual. But what if we change the word individual to the word community? Survival of the fittest community. A close-knit fabric of interwoven roots voluntarily shifting resources to create the maximum benefit for one another, and by proxy, an entire woodland ecosystem. Cooperation that begets abundance. A community that thrives rather than simply surviving. It used to be that the forest was a truly scary place. How many fairy tales took very dark turns when the Brothers Grimm sent their protagonists, as the kids' musical might say, ... into the woods. So often it was used as the stand-in for all things unknown, wild, foreign, weighed in equal parts fear, but also enchantment. It represented both dread and magic. So why the discussion about the woods and fairy tales at a ceremony focused on your accomplishments and the study of sustainability? After all, many of us will go on to work in a system that has grown in its continued belief that survival of the fittest individual, and with good reason in many ways. With the rise of our industrial system, the world's desperately poor has been reduced by over 1 billion people in the course of the last 20 years. A physicist would look at such a result and immediately ask, though, at what cost? For much of our history as a species, those costs were negligible, or even outright invisible. But as our 7.5 billion people's needs begin to ask questions of the Earth's abundance, the limits of exponential growth in a closed system are becoming more and more apparent. The morality of meeting the basic needs of so many are coming into conflict with the generous systems that allowed for the growth of humanity in the first place. Back in 1944, the U.S. Coast Guard released 29 reindeer on St. Matthew's Island in the middle of the Bering Sea. Some of you may be familiar with the example I'm preparing to cite here, but for those of you who aren't, St. Matthew's is a windblown, battered island that would be pretty unpleasant for most people, but it was absolute reindeer paradise. Those 29 reindeer grew, thrived, procreated, quite successfully, I might add. There were no forces against their growth and prosperity. By the year 1963, they were not 29, not 290, not 2,900, but 6,000 reindeer on this small island in the middle of the Bering Sea. But by 1965, there were 42. They had overshot the carrying capacity and the abundance of this paradise that they had known that seemed to have been made just for them. Now you might expect that with that kind of correction to a population that they could continue to perhaps build their population up once again into something maybe a little bit more sustainable. But by 1984, the last reindeer on St. Matthew's Island had perished. No longer the systems that were there that provided for those reindeer had disappeared along with them. So once again, why a tale of reindeer doom in an audience all too familiar with the risks of population overshoot and collapse? The reindeer of St. Matthew's Island, in their own strange way, have brought me to be here with you today. I've never seen them, but in Paul Hawkins' book, The Ecology of Commerce, he cited this natural experiment in his chapter called The Death of Birth. It was in this chapter that fell into the hands of a founder and CEO of an industrial manufacturing company that he later described as a spear in the chest moment, a spear that lodged in the heart of a man looking for the answer to a simple question: what is Interface doing for the environment? Interface is the world's largest manufacturer of carpet tile. Back in 1973, Ray wagered his life savings and that of his best friends on a vision of a modular floor that would meet the needs of a modern workplace. It quickly grew into a $1 billion per year business, going public in 1983. And by 1994, Ray had every reason to be proud of his global business that he built himself, legally, that employed 5,000 people across the world. By all measures of the time, he had earned a relaxing retirement by making something from nothing, playing by the rules. But whose rules were those? Upon reading The Ecology of Commerce, he realized that the decline of our biosphere was directly linked to the rise of industrialization. The take, make, waste model on which Interface was built was doomed to fail someday, the day that the resources that our products were made from ran out. Ray was convicted as a plunderer of the earth, but there was a silver lining. In Hawkins' conclusion, the only entity big enough, powerful enough, and pervasive enough to reverse these problems was business and industry itself. Interface didn't have to be the problem. It could be the solution. In response, Ray set Interface on an uncharted course to a goal he called Mission Zero, where by the year 2020, we would have zero negative impact on the environment. It was silly, it was audacious, it was ridiculous, but most importantly, it's been incredibly successful. Typically, sustainability initiatives are viewed as expensive window dressing, handled by the marketing department. But when you take the time to commit to learning from the master of efficiency and innovation, Mother Nature, the inspiration for both people and product is astounding. I'm pleased to announce that on net, we have met our Mission Zero goal a little bit early, but much like the Hippocratic Oath in medicine, doing no harm is only the first step in curing a broken system. In our next chapter, we have begun what we call the climate take back, using Interface as a model business that creates our products and systems in a way that sequesters atmospheric carbon, just like a forest. In fact, we produce a carpet tile already that, when made, leaves less atmospheric CO2 that would lead to climate change than had it not been made at all. It'll be available here in the United States for our 2020 goal that we'd set forth and put in front of the world. In this new vision for our business, we've begun our first steps to emulate the cooperative systems that the longest-lived residents of our planets already have mastered. We like to call it factories as forests, and we are doing much better than surviving. We are thriving. All this started from one exceptionally sane or monumentally crazy idea that business, industry, and commerce have a lot to learn from nature. We may not have the next Ray Anderson in this room, but I wouldn't bet against it. Do you know where Ray got that copy of Paul's book? Not some other big shot exec or policy guru. It came from Joyce Lavelle. She's a salesperson in the Bay Area who gave it to Ray on the off chance that he might read it and maybe learn something. I don't think there's anyone here who couldn't give an idea or a book to someone. Monumental change often starts with small gestures. Many of you will go on to work for organizations with clear purpose to affect the greater good using sustainability as a guiding principle in your mission. Many of you will go on to work in organizations that don't live up to the morals you hold dear in conserving our planet. I'm here to tell you that both roles are critical to our local and global communities. Think back to the trees we began discussing. If they serve as a model for the next industrial revolution, competing to be the most cooperative, and as systems that create abundance and generosity at every exchange, then you are the stewards of that forest. You are the guides. You are the ones who can show others that the future isn't scary for all its vastness and still unknown secrets. You can and will show them that this future as a forest is a place of refuge, of wonder, of abundance, and magic. Be the leaders that show them the forest so that they can truly see the trees.